Lee's his name. Movies is his game. You're listening to 30 with Lee. Now kick back, baby, and enjoy.
Hello everyone, I'm Lee Sanders, and you are checking out a special 30 with Lee edition, where here on this episode, we are going to be giving those flowers to the legendary Sidney Poitier, who passed away on January 6, 2022 at the age of 94. Poitier passed away at his home in Los Angeles, California. What a rough start to 2022, as we've had a couple of big names so far that have been announced that have passed. And at the time that we're actually recording this right now, we had got news of Bob Saget passing away at the age of 65. Definitely want to offer my thoughts, prayers, and condolences to the friends, family, colleagues of Mr. Bob Saget. Now, that is a developing story. I am sure we will know much more details as the weeks progress. But for now, we're talking about Sidney Poitier. I have to tell you, of all the actors that I have had the profound privilege, that I've had the honor to watch their work for so many years, none have been more profound to me than one Sidney Poitier, because Sidney Poitier, when you look at the films, and this isn't the first time that we're talking about Sidney Poitier, by the way, on our 30 with Lee series from a couple of years ago, you can actually check it out on the YouTube channel and also on our Patreon page. There were at least two occasions that I can recall off the break where we reviewed in depth a Sidney Poitier movie. The first one that we reviewed goes back to 2018, where we tackled 1970s. Rewind it back a little bit further. Actually, August of 2018, we tackled In the Heat of the Night from 1967, starring Poitier and Rod Steiger. And then we followed that up, I believe, later that month. Yes, it was later that August of the same year. We tackled 1970s, They Call Me Mr. Tibbs, starring Sidney Poitier. So maybe within the scope of what all is coming about, and we're here talking about Poitier right now, maybe I will release the latter as a free-for-all so everybody can check it out. I think that would be the most fair thing to do. But I know the In the Heat of the Night is available everywhere for folks to check out. So this isn't the first time that we're here talking about Mr. Poitier, is the point that I'm making. When I truly say that this man had a profound impact on my life, and as a young kid growing up, first being introduced to all things cinema, I really sincerely mean that, because it wasn't just cinema that he really opened my eyes to as far as interpretations of what makes a good film, but he also opened my mind big time to what was most importantly going on in the world around me, as far as civil rights, as far as the political landscape per se. You know, how we all were interacting with one another really opened my eyes in those respective categories in a huge, huge way that continues to stay with me this very day. And I love seeing all the great love and the support that came in the form of tributes, as many honored the passing of Sidney Poitier. I love what President Joe Biden had wrote in part, saying, and I quote, "With unflinching grandeur and poise, his singular warmth, depth, and stature on screen, Sidney helped open the hearts of millions and change the way America saw itself." Former President Barack Obama paid tribute to Poitier, calling him a singular talent who epitomized dignity and grace. Michelle Obama, Hillary and Bill Clinton, they also had released respected statements as well. The entire entertainment industry, Hollywood, definitely went on notice, paying their tributes to Poitier. This had included veteran director Martin Scorsese, who wrote for years the spotlight was on Sidney Poitier. He had a vocal precision and physical power and grace that at moments seemed almost supernatural. Denzel Washington wrote, "It was a privilege to call Sidney Poitier my friend. He was a gentle man and opened doors for all of us that had been closed for years." Harry Belafonte, Morgan Freeman, Viola Davis, Whoopi Goldberg, Jeffrey Wright, Giancarlo Esposito, Ron Howard, Quincy Jones, the list goes on and on and on, but many made sure they gave their flowers to Sidney Poitier when they found out about his passing. You know, Sidney Poitier, respected actor, film director, even an ambassador. When you look at his acting career when he was coming up and all, and you look at the times in which he was coming up as an actor, let's be honest, we're talking cinema, right? This is 30 with Lee after all, and we talk a lot about film and television. When you look particularly at what was happening with films in the late 20s, 30s, 40s, even 50s, you always had blacks, minorities in general, but blacks particularly. They were always delegated to a blue collar type of role. It would be the role in which that black person would be serving as someone's maid or someone's butler or a janitor or a cook or a homeless person. It was always a very lower tier position in the movies that you would see these blacks in. And then you would also see blacks in roles where for comedic relief, they would be the butt of constant jokes. You would always see that. We had a period in cinema where white people would paint their faces straight up black and put a little bit of white makeup around their lips, around their eyes. And this, of course, would be known as blackfacing. They would be doing this to mock African Americans. That was also a pretty common thread that you would see in cinema during that particular time frame. When black actors were on screen, you would see them when they would talk particularly. They could be very educated. They could very well know how to read and read extremely well. They could most likely talk extremely well. But during that particular time in cinema, they were not allowed to really be themselves. They had to talk like this. They had to talk very, you understand where I'm coming from? They had to talk in such a way where they presented themselves as low intellect, because the narrative that was being spun out there was that whites were superior. They were more smarter. They were the smartest, that they were the most wealthiest, that they were the ones that were the best dressed. Just check it off. Going down that list, just check. Whereas all the other races were secondary, if not last. Sure, once in a blue moon, you would see a black person that would do some singing, or maybe they would be playing some music. But yeah, you might see that. But other than that, even at that, look at, for the most part of those films back in the day, who they were entertaining. Think about that for a second, if you haven't already. So there was a lot that was going on during that time frame, as Sidney Poitier, born in 1927. So you can just imagine the hardship that he was dealing with. You know, after leaving the army, Sidney Poitier had found himself working as a dishwasher until he managed to land in a role based off of an audition he did. He landed a role in an American Negro theater production, and it was there when he joined that, you know, initially it was kind of interesting because when he joined the American Negro theater, he was rejected automatically by the audiences. Contrary to what was expected of black actors at the time, he basically was tone deaf, which made him unable to sing, and determined to refine his acting skills and try to get rid of his Bohemian accent, because it was a strong, thick Bohemian accent that honestly stayed with him until the day he died. He never was able to shake that off. Honestly, he never was. He could have easily said, okay, I'm not going to be able to go that far with my acting because of this accent. And yeah, with my inability to sing, I don't really know if this is the right avenue I should be going. I don't really know how many other doors I'm going to be able to knock down with this. Maybe I should just go on ahead and call it a day. And you know what? It is what it is. But he did not let up. He did not let up. Instead, he continued to persevere. He dedicated himself to touching up his acting skills and trying to do his best to not make that accent of his not so thick. And he spent particularly good amount of time modeling his speech patterns and everything after radio personality Norman Brookshire. And when he felt he was ready, he actually went back to that American Negro theater that was pay dirt, because from there it landed him a role in the Broadway production Lysistrata. And from there, that pretty much opened up other doors which fell for him, luckily, in landing other roles on stage plays, ultimately connecting to the big one of them all in the 1950s. Of course, I'm talking about 1959's A Raisin in the Sun. And of course, from the Raisin in the Sun play, ultimately, there would be a movie based off of that. So, as you all know, that play, which is by Lorraine Hansberry, it debuted on Broadway in 1959. And the title comes from the poem Harlem by Langston Hughes. You all may know of that name if you know your stuff. I believe you all definitely do. I know you guys do. So, of course, by Sidney Poitier continuing to do that Raisin in the Sun Broadway play, which was a huge success, it ultimately led to the 1961 film version of A Raisin in the Sun. And go figure, you have Sidney Poitier that comes right back in there. Ruby Dee as well. What a great film. What a great, powerful film that was, which was nominated for so many awards, as it follows a black family that wants a better life away from the ghetto and all of that. And this film, for very good reason, in 2005 was selected for preservation in the United States National Film Registry by the Library of Congress. And, you know, that's a pretty big deal when a movie lands in that respected division because of its historical, cultural impact and everything. Now, remember what I said earlier about how movies were back in that particular time period of the 20s going into the 50s, and how minorities, particularly blacks, were portrayed, the roles they would be in. You would never find them in a lead role where they were of equal value to their white counterparts. You would never see that. And yet in A Raisin in the Sun, here we had a black man portrayed by Sidney Poitier, who was a chauffeur that was driving a white man around all day, anywhere that this man wanted to go. So he's able to see these really nice neighborhoods, and pretty much when his shift is over, he's going to the ghetto, and he has this small, very small apartment where it's him, his wife, his kid, his sister, and his mother. I'm pretty sure I mentioned his wife is in there as well. So like all of these people living in this crammed apartment that only has 2 bedrooms. Yes, you heard me right. It only has 2 bedrooms. That's a whole lot of shuffling that you got to do. And then don't even get me started on the bathroom, as there's no bathroom in that apartment. No, there is a common bathroom that is pretty much on that floor that their apartment and the other apartments on that level have to use. And no wonder we would find Sidney Poitier's character in A Raisin in the Sun to be so depressed at the end of his shift, always going to the local bar, drinking away his problems. But you got right down to the heart of the matter of this man who wanted so much more for his family, who wanted so much more for his son, and felt that all the grinding that he was doing, you know, he wanted it to really be of something significant, something that could really be paid forward, that it's not all for nothing. We see all the scheming and stunts that he tries to pull to try to make some money and everything. But remember that. And I think that just really summed up the way Poitier delivered such a memorable and powerful performance in that movie. You know, it just is one of those defining roles that just stays with you and that you can easily relate to. And that's something that I've always liked about Sidney Poitier and the movies that he stars in, which is he always brings a very calm, a very quiet, very sly sophistication to his role. Just straight up common sense. There is always that crumb or nugget of good that you get in his characters. Here is a man that is always able to tell you, you know, right and wrong, and perhaps why you shouldn't go down this path as he demonstrates it, or a good path that he demonstrates and why you need to stay in this direction. He went into these roles that he went into, giving you all kinds of, yeah, that's what's going on. You know, he really was at his time. I know some people over the years, they gave him a bad rep. They would always say, you know, he's not really the black actor because he's doing these roles where he's essentially catering to the white man. I'm sure many of you all have heard that narrative that would be put out there, right? And that's something that we definitely had explored off and on over the years whenever we've talked about Sidney Poitier and everything. I honestly believe in my heart of hearts that when Sidney Poitier had his mind made up that he wanted to be taken seriously as an actor, it wasn't just one of those type of deals where he wanted to just go in, make a really good movie, and that's it. He wanted to change hearts. He wanted to change minds, one project at a time. That, yes, not only is he a very good actor who just happens to be black, but he is the type of actor that, and I don't really know if I don't believe that's the thing. I don't really believe he decided to just take up the mantle and wave that flag for all blacks after him. I'm sure now that everything is said and done and he was able to think about it more in retrospect as his career was pretty much over and done with, I'm sure now he was probably in that reflective state of mind where, yeah, if you want to say that, yeah, sure. But I'm sure he'd be the first to tell you all I was thinking about at the time was just changing the narrative that, blacks couldn't be in movies. They couldn't do XYZ. And that was a small task, or rather a big task that he had on his hands. I don't think you, me, or anybody else way back then could have taken up the mantle and done what he did, because although he was delivering many great, memorable performances, take your pick, whether you want to talk about, Raisin in the Sun, Lilies of the Field, A Patch of Blue, In the Heat of the Night, or my personal favorite, Guess Who's Coming to Dinner, which dealt with interracial relationships. Sidney Poitier tackled some very important, heavy roles during his time as an actor. And sure, some of those roles that he was in, it definitely made us feel a bit uncomfortable. But at the same time, it also made us take a good hard look at ourselves in the mirror and really ask ourselves, okay, so yeah, as a society, where are we really going here? Look at where we were and look at where we could be if we just turn this ship around and go in this direction instead of staying on what's obviously this messed up course, this messed up path that we're taking right here. And so he really, in my honest opinion, one film at a time, he really did go into this in all his movies. I personally felt, for me, my biggest interpretation was he always found that one good grace that a character had as far as his calling card, as far as his trademark, and he would just latch on to it and it would just magnify during the course of the movie. When you hear people say that Sidney Poitier was perhaps the Martin Luther King Jr. for movies, that's not an understatement. That's not somebody that's putting that out there, trying to make a nice little sound bite or anything of that nature. No, not the case at all. He was the Martin Luther King Jr. of movies. He was. You even have several film historians and journalists that have all dubbed him Hollywood's first African-American film star. As far as box office sensation, yes, definitely he was that. Poitier was the most influential actor of Hollywood for his time. When you talk about the diversity that was going on in Hollywood, or the lack of, and how he pretty much came to the scene, shook it up to its core, and just busted it wide open, that he essentially did pave the way for other black actors in film, in Hollywood. He did pave the way. It would be no different than Jackie Robinson to baseball. It would be no different than that. No different than that whatsoever. He was the first black actor to be successful as far as being a mainstay in Hollywood, especially as far as Hollywood movies, that remember what I said earlier, you always had that black actor that was in a movie in a non-stereotypical role, but Sidney Poitier's influence, especially when you go back to the 1950s and the 60s, constantly you looked at his roles and you just felt, wow, what a good role model, right? He really changed the narrative of how blacks were, unfortunately, always stereotyped. You think about how, oh, black, they're just uneducated, they're this, they're that. No, he shook that whole narrative up and then some, and then some. Very influential black actor. I mean, you think about when he became the first black actor to be nominated for an Academy Award and the first black male actor to win the award. He's also dubbed as a sole representative of African Americans in mainstream cinema during the 1950s and 60s, which is at one of the most critical times in American history, because we're talking about the civil rights movement back then. Poitier was essentially an ambassador to white America while representing Black Power when you stop and think about it. And his role in diversifying Hollywood, he really did pave the way. There would be no Denzel Washingtons, Mahershala Ali's, there would be no Giancarlo Esposito, Jamie Foxx's, Halle Berry's, Viola Davis, Tyler Perry's. We'd be going back and forth just all night going through the list of names, but they all would not be where they are today. None of that would be made possible without Sidney Poitier going in there and pretty much shaking up the foundation to its core. So when, you see all the tributes that continue to come in for him, understand it's not so much, what's everybody tripping over? He lived until he was 94. That's a nice, long, rich life. Don't really know. It is because of the great impact in front of the cameras that, and also behind the cameras as well, because, he cared very greatly about education. He did care very deeply about his people. Let's not also forget Sidney Poitier, as far as civil rights and all of that. He definitely was there as well. He represented. Let's not also forget he was there at the 1963 March on Washington for Jobs and Freedom alongside Harry Belafonte and Charlton Heston. Let's not also forget that. I don't want people to think that Sidney Poitier was simply one of those individuals that just, all he was doing was just making his money in front of the cameras, and that pretty much was it. He didn't do anything else. He made his money and no. His rise to stardom, make no mistake about it, it coincided with the civil rights movement, of which, when you go back to that 1950, 1960s period, he actually won the Academy Award for Best Actor for Lilies of the Field in 1964, which was the same year that the Civil Rights Act was ratified. And so just think about that weight of racial responsibility. Heavy is the crown for the person who is wearing it, right? He really, really felt that. He really felt that. And he really was Hollywood's first black leading man that pretty much had reflected what was going on with the civil rights movement on screen. That's a lot to unpack right there, but this man really, really was behind the camera or in front of the camera. This man really was a force. He really was. And I tell you what, for me, nothing I loved more whenever I would just load up a Sidney Poitier film, nothing I would love more than when he would walk into the room and it was just, whoa. Who is this tall, handsome looking, dark skinned brother with this nice fine hair? Oh, he looks like he's important. He looks like somebody I need to know. What's going on here? I can remember being a little kid and seeing this man. I mean, of course, I'm a product child of the 80s, but one of my first earliest memories of Sidney Poitier was in the heat of the night. And I just remember watching that movie frame for frame from the moment that he got off the train and how he was dealing with those racist Mississippi police officers from Sheriff Gillespie to when he had that epic exchange, that epic first exchange with Chief Gillespie, and Gillespie finds out that Virgil, portrayed by Poitier, is actually a cop from Philadelphia. Every single role that Poitier was in, it was always the type of roles. Hey, who is this dude? What's going on here? Hell, I even like the stuff that he did with Bill Cosby, Uptown, Saturday Night. That actually found him really embracing his comedic side more. And I gotta say, the stuff that he did there with Bill Cosby still holds up extremely well to this very day. Isn't that kind of funny when you stop and think about it? Because when you look at those two films, Uptown, Saturday Night, and the other movie will come to me in just a hot little bit. But when you look at those films that were released, Let's Do It Again is the other one that I'm thinking of. Those came out in the 70s. You think about the time that was blaxploitation films at its, you really stop and think about that. And you had the Fred Williamsons that were running around, or you had the Pam Griers. You think about those type of films that were running around, the Max, Superfly. You think about those films. And sure, Sidney Poitier could have easily, during that time period, he could have easily gotten very lost in those type of roles. I'm sure he could have been Blackula, or, you feel me? But he didn't go down those paths. He still paid particularly close attention to, okay, what is going to be the overall consensus for this project? How does this not only impact my fan base, but how does this impact everybody as a culture, blacks, whites, Hispanics, etc.? And to that point, he continued to look for roles during that time period that really had you truly think and truly had you walk away feeling, honestly, what can I do to better myself and the people around me? So trust me when I say, from one black man talking about another black man that has such a profound impact on my life, on my career, how I go about interacting with my brothers and sisters, but most importantly, how I go about interacting with people outside of my race. Definitely Sidney Poitier played a huge part in that. And so I'm definitely am going to miss him. My biggest disappointment, honestly, I felt that he still had many years of acting that we should have been bestowed upon. We really should have, but you're talking about an acting career that pretty much was starting in the 40s, and he went through at least almost 5 decades. I mean, he went all the way into the early 2000s, but I always just feel sometimes when I just think about certain things, I always feel that we should have gotten at least 15 more years, because it just really felt as though, but at the same time, he had already set the table. He had already all those decades of great films, great body of work. He did what he needed to do. Real quick, if you were to ask me for my personal favorites, no particular order. Lilies of the Field, A Raisin in the Sun, Patch of Blue, In the Heat of the Night, Guess Who's Coming to Dinner, Uptown Saturday Night, Sneakers. Exactly in that order. That is how I'm laying it out there. But Sidney Poitier, rest in power. Rest in power, good sir. Hey, I'd love to know what you think. What is your favorite Sidney Poitier films, moments from his career? Definitely feel free to share your thoughts with me. Let me know how you had enjoyed this special edition of 30 with Lee. Hey, I always love hearing from you guys. So if you enjoyed this and you haven't done so already and you made it up to this point, do me a huge favor. Hit that like button. When you do that, you really help spread the word about the content. It helps YouTube give this particular episode and the channel itself more exposure when you hit that like button. And do feel free to subscribe so you never miss out on future content that comes your way on a weekly basis. You can get at me on Twitter, Facebook, and Instagram. Use the keywords, the RCWR Show. And until next go round, I'm wishing all of you all to be safe and most importantly, be kind to one another. You've been checking out 30 with Lee on our Sidney Poitier tribute. Take care.
Thanks for listening. An Infinity One Productions presentation, keeping it honest, insightful, and interactive.